We're going to talk about the Fever. Sophie Cunningham. She has been fined by the WNBA. I got a feeling that Caitlin Clark's going to write somebody a check and cover that fine. I got a feeling that, or maybe PayPal or something. There's going to be a deposit magically that is conveyed from Caitlin Clark to Sophie Cunningham, as it should be, depending on the amount of the fine. I mean, if you get fined $500, you just pay the 5 bills and you're done, right? But if it's $5,000, I think Caitlin's got to cough it up. Let's go. While Sophie did the right thing in backing up Caitlin's got to do the right thing in covering the cost of the backup, right?
A petition with thousands of signatures is demanding Sophie Cunningham be permanently banned from the WNBA. The reason? She's apparently too dangerous to play professional basketball. But here's what nobody saw coming. This isn't just some random player losing her temper. Sophie Cunningham is a certified black belt who's been training to fight since she was 6 years old, and she's turned protecting Caitlin Clark into a full-time combat mission.
There was a fast break sequence where J.C. Sheldon came out and thought it was all good, but who was waiting for her? Sophie Cunningham. Sophie Cunningham steps up, grabs her, knocks her down, gets a flagrant 2 for this, they end up calling. Sophie takes a step back, gathers herself. J.C. Sheldon kind of gets up, and another teammate, I don't recall the young lady's name, tried to get in Sophie's face. Sophie fights him back. They're running each other, and they start choking each other. And, Cunningham's kind of in control, seemingly, because Sheldon's head is getting, pushed down. I don't think she really wants those problems with Sophie, but this escalated because of the contact and the calls earlier in the game and the tone and tenor that the referees allowed both of these teams to play with.
The WNBA thought they were getting a sharpshooter from Missouri. Instead, they got a farm-raised enforcer with martial arts training and absolutely zero tolerance for anyone who dares to breathe wrong in Clark's direction. And now the entire league is scrambling to figure out how to handle a player who treats basketball like a contact sport and her teammate like a member of the royal family. What started as basketball has become something completely different. Sophie isn't just playing defense. She's running a one-woman security operation, and every team in the league knows it. The question isn't whether she'll strike again. The question is, who's brave enough to find out what happens when you test a black belt disguised as a basketball player?
I think the WNBA is doing a terrible job at protecting its star. Marina Mabrey should have absolutely been ejected. Sophie, I know, ended up with a flagrant 2. J.C. Sheldon got ejected for sure. And they ushered her out of there with boos. But this was not a game that I would think the league is going to be proud of. And there's going to be tons of scrutiny on this. For me, this exceeds anything thus far involving Angel Reese. That was child's play, the opening game of the season for the Fever, compared to this night with Mabrey and J.C. Sheldon, because there was an element that kind of hung over this game from the third quarter on.
Most people discovered Sophie Cunningham's fighting background after she nearly started World War III during the Fever versus Connecticut Sun game. But here's the part that should terrify every player in the league. Sophie earned her black belt in Taekwondo when she was 6 years old. Not 16, 6. She was literally Missouri's youngest black belt in history, which means she's been perfecting the art of controlled violence since before she could tie her own shoes. This isn't some recreational martial arts hobby she picked up in college. Sophie has been training her body and mind for combat since kindergarten, and now she's using those skills to protect the most targeted player in professional basketball. The WNBA has no idea what they're dealing with, because they've never had to manage a player whose first instinct is to neutralize threats with techniques she learned in a dojo.
Smoke still waits for no one. So there was, the enforcers were still in there looking to headhunt, and they really showed that they would fight for it on both sides. This was a way, in Sophie Cunningham's case, someone stepping up for Caitlin Clark almost like never before, immediately targeting the person that was targeting them. And I feel like J.C. Sheldon was clearly targeting Caitlin Clark most of this game, and that is, that comes from a function of, she guarded her in one-on-one situations a lot up the court, and then rolled into a lot of doubles in the half court, but there was talking and chirping all game, and for me, it was punctuated by Caitlin Clark's final play before she came out of the game, where she stares J.C. Sheldon down, essentially demonstrates, she's like, if you poke me in my eye, I will shoot it in yours.
Manuel Acho put it perfectly when he warned the league about Sophie's fighting background. She didn't just stumble into being Caitlin Clark's protector, she was literally born and trained for this exact scenario. 20 years of martial arts discipline, combined with a fierce loyalty to her teammate, has created the most dangerous player the WNBA has ever seen. And she's just getting started. The black belt revelation is only the beginning of Sophie's combat credentials. She grew up on a farm in Missouri, where being tough wasn't optional, it was survival. Her own sister Lindsay has stories about their childhood battles that would make UFC fighters cringe. Sophie didn't just play fight with her siblings, she drew blood on a regular basis, turning family disagreements into full contact warfare. But the most shocking part of Sophie's athletic background? She was her high school football team's kicker. While other girls were playing volleyball or running track, Sophie was suiting up with the boys and delivering bone-crushing tackles during practice. The SEC network documented her football career, showing footage of a teenage Sophie hitting harder than most professional players would dare. This is someone who spent her childhood perfecting martial arts, her teenage years playing football with boys, and her college career dominating basketball. She's not just physically strong, she's been conditioning her mind for combat since she could walk. The farm-raised mentality combined with formal fighting training has produced a player who views basketball as just another form of controlled aggression. Every story about Sophie's background reveals the same thing. She's never backed down from a fight, never avoided physical confrontation, and never let anyone push around someone she cares about. The WNBA teams targeting Caitlin Clark have no idea they're dealing with someone whose entire life has been preparation for exactly this moment. The transformation from teammate to bodyguard didn't happen overnight. Sophie watched Caitlin Clark get targeted, fouled, and disrespected game after game while referees looked the other way. She saw opposing players treating the league's biggest star like a tackling dummy, and her martial arts training kicked in. Not the techniques, but the mindset. In Taekwondo, you're taught to protect what matters most, and Sophie decided Caitlin Clark matters most. What makes Sophie different from other players who talk about having their teammates back? She actually knows how to fight. Most basketball players can talk tough and maybe throw a few wild punches if things get heated. Sophie can disable an opponent with precision, control the situation with martial arts techniques, and end confrontations before they escalate. She's not just willing to fight, she's qualified to win. The league started noticing Sophie's protective instincts early in the season, but they assumed it was normal teammate chemistry. They were wrong. Sophie wasn't just playing basketball, she was conducting surveillance, reading body language, and positioning herself for maximum defensive impact. Her martial arts background taught her to anticipate threats, and she was treating every game like a potential combat scenario. Teams across the league began to realize that targeting Caitlin Clark meant dealing with Sophie Cunningham, and Sophie wasn't interested in verbal warnings or gentle pushes. She was prepared to use every technique in her arsenal to neutralize threats, even if it meant getting ejected, fined, or suspended. The WNBA had never seen this level of calculated protection, and they had no idea how to handle it. Then came the Connecticut Sun game, and everything exploded. The sequence of events reads like a martial arts movie script. J.C. Sheldon pokes Caitlin in the eye, Marina Mabry shoves Clark to the ground, and Sophie Cunningham transforms from basketball player to vengeful black belt in approximately 3 seconds. What happened next wasn't just a basketball altercation, it was a demonstration of 20 years of fighting expertise. Sophie didn't just foul J.C. Sheldon in retaliation. She executed what martial arts experts are calling a perfect tie clinch, using her Taekwondo training to control Sheldon's body position while delivering a message that resonated throughout the entire arena. This wasn't random aggression. It was precise, controlled violence designed to send a warning to every player in the league. The most shocking part? Newly released footage shows Fever staff members physically holding Sophie back during the altercation, suggesting she was prepared to escalate the situation far beyond what actually happened. The black belt was ready to use her full skill set, and only the intervention of team personnel prevented a complete martial arts demonstration on national television. Marina Mabry's foul on Caitlin was later upgraded to a flagrant 2, validating Sophie's protective instincts. But Sophie received additional fines for her retaliation, proving that the league is more concerned with controlling her than protecting their biggest star. The WNBA is learning that managing a trained fighter is completely different from managing a basketball player, and they're struggling to find the balance. The Connecticut Sun game was just the beginning. Sophie's reputation as Caitlin's enforcer has spread throughout the league, and opposing teams are now forced to consider the martial arts consequences of targeting Clark. This isn't just basketball strategy anymore, it's psychological warfare, and Sophie is winning. Sophie Cunningham's jersey sales have exploded, making her the second biggest star in the WNBA almost overnight. But her popularity has also created the most controversial petition in professional sports history. Thousands of fans are demanding that Sophie be permanently banned from the league, arguing that her martial arts background makes her too dangerous for professional basketball. The petition claims that Sophie's Taekwondo training gives her an unfair advantage in physical confrontations, essentially turning basketball altercations into martial arts demonstrations. Critics argue that allowing a black belt to play professional basketball is like bringing a knife to a fistfight. The other players simply aren't equipped to handle someone with formal combat training. But Sophie's supporters see the situation completely differently. They argue that Caitlin Clark has been targeted and abused all season, while referees ignored obvious fouls and dangerous plays. Sophie isn't the problem. She's the solution to a league that refuses to protect its biggest star. Her martial arts background is exactly what Clark needs to level the playing field against players who think they can get away with anything. The divide in fan opinion reflects a larger question about the future of women's basketball. Should players with combat training be allowed to use those skills to protect teammates? Or does martial arts expertise cross the line from basketball into something more dangerous? The WNBA has never faced this situation before, and their response will determine whether Sophie continues her role as Clark's personal bodyguard. League officials are reportedly meeting to discuss new rules and regulations specifically designed to address Sophie's unique situation. The fact that they're changing league policy because of one player's background shows just how significantly she's impacted the entire sport. Sophie Cunningham has single-handedly forced the WNBA to confront the reality of mixing martial arts with basketball. The ripple effects of Sophie's protection strategy extend far beyond individual games. Teams throughout the league are now forced to reconsider their approach to physical play, knowing that targeting Caitlin Clark means dealing with someone who can fight back with professional-level technique. This psychological deterrent has changed the entire dynamic of WNBA competition. Players who previously felt comfortable using aggressive tactics against Clark are now second-guessing themselves, knowing that Sophie is watching and ready to respond. The martial arts threat has created a protective bubble around the league's biggest star, essentially giving Clark the space she needs to dominate without constant physical interference. But Sophie's impact goes beyond just protecting Caitlin. Her presence has emboldened other players to stand up for their teammates, creating a more physical and confrontational style of play throughout the league. The WNBA is becoming more aggressive, more protective, and more willing to escalate conflicts, all because one black belt decided to use her training in defense of her teammate. Coaches are now forced to prepare their players for potential martial arts encounters, studying Sophie's techniques and teaching their teams how to avoid triggering her protective instincts. This is unprecedented in professional sports, game planning specifically to avoid a physical confrontation with a player whose combat training makes them genuinely dangerous. The long-term consequences of Sophie's approach are still unfolding. Will other teams recruit players with martial arts backgrounds? Will the league implement new rules to prevent combat-trained athletes from using their skills on the court? Sophie Cunningham has opened a door that the WNBA may never be able to close, and the entire sport is struggling to adapt. The WNBA is facing an impossible decision. They can't ignore Sophie's effectiveness as Caitlin Clark's protector, but they also can't openly endorse a player using martial arts techniques during basketball games. League officials are caught between protecting their biggest star and maintaining the integrity of the sport, and Sophie's black belt training has made that balance nearly impossible to achieve. Rumors suggest that the league is considering new rules specifically targeting players with combat training backgrounds. These regulations would essentially force Sophie to choose between her martial arts instincts and her basketball career, creating a precedent that could affect future players with similar backgrounds. The WNBA is literally rewriting the rulebook because of one player's unique skill set, but Sophie shows no signs of backing down. Her recent interview suggests that she views protecting Caitlin Clark as her primary responsibility, with basketball success being secondary. This mindset terrifies opposing teams because it means Sophie is willing to sacrifice her own career to ensure Clark's safety. A player with nothing to lose and 20 years of fighting experience is the WNBA's worst nightmare. The most intriguing possibility is that Sophie's approach becomes the new standard for teammate protection. If her strategy proves successful, other teams might start recruiting players with martial arts backgrounds specifically to protect their star players. The WNBA could evolve into a sport where combat training is as important as shooting ability, fundamentally changing the nature of professional women's basketball. Sophie Cunningham has single-handedly transformed from an unknown player into the most controversial figure in professional sports. Her black belt training, combined with her unwavering loyalty to Caitlin Clark, has created a situation the WNBA has never encountered before. The league is struggling to balance player safety, competitive integrity, and the reality that their second biggest star is a trained fighter masquerading as a basketball player. The petition to ban Sophie from the WNBA reflects the fear that her martial arts background gives her an unfair advantage in physical confrontations. But her supporters argue that she's simply using her skills to protect a teammate who's been targeted and abused all season. The truth is probably somewhere in between. Sophie isn't just playing basketball anymore, she's conducting a personal protection mission that happens to take place on a basketball court. What happens next will determine the future of physical play in women's basketball. If Sophie continues her aggressive protection strategy, the league will be forced to adapt or risk losing control of the sport entirely. If she's forced to tone down her approach, Caitlin Clark loses her most effective defender and the targeting continues. Either way, Sophie Cunningham has permanently changed the WNBA, and there's no going back. The black belt who became a bodyguard has created a new category of professional athlete, the combat-trained teammate. Sophie's success in protecting Caitlin Clark while maintaining her own basketball effectiveness has proven that martial arts skills can be successfully integrated into professional sports. The question isn't whether she'll continue her role as Clark's enforcer. The question is whether the WNBA can survive having a trained fighter who's willing to use every technique in her arsenal to protect what matters most. Sophie Cunningham entered the WNBA as a basketball player. She's evolved into something much more dangerous, a professional athlete with the skills, mindset, and motivation to turn basketball into a contact sport. The league is learning that managing a black belt is completely different from managing a regular player, and they're struggling to find solutions. Sophie has forced the WNBA to confront the reality that some players bring more than just basketball skills to the court, and the consequences of that reality are still unfolding. The farm girl who became a black belt, who became a basketball player, who became a bodyguard, has created the most compelling story in professional sports. Sophie Cunningham isn't just protecting Caitlin Clark. She's protecting the future of physical play in women's basketball. And with 20 years of martial arts training behind her, she's uniquely qualified for the job.